June 18th, Spiritualism in the Final Atonement. 3 steps of unity conscious, counterfeit of the heavenly sanctuary, Final Atonement. This discussion, Spiritualism in the Final Atonement, is a real eye-opener for those who can understand it. There is no other way to explain this. The facts are clear, and you see, very few today understand or want to understand the inroads of spiritualism in the Final Atonement. Spiritualism in the Final Atonement will be the vehicle that Lucifer will use to steer people away from the everlasting gospel, which will be perceived as the religion of the Piscean age. The Day of Atonement for Messianic Jews and rabbinic teachers in general is that they might see the Day of Atonement in an unofficial way, in terms of Israel being the suffering servant nation of Isaiah 53, and see themselves as reconciling the nations of this world unto themselves during the Messianic era, Isaiah 2. That has to be the final conclusion. If you see yourself as the servant nation, replacing the Messiah's role, absolutely perfect for events of Revelation 13, 11, and the 2 Thessalonians 2 guy. While this is not a traditional concept of the Day of Atonement, it's been echoed by some in an informal fashion, since the theology of the Day of Atonement is clearly spelled out in Leviticus 16, and when practiced on a yearly basis by the Jews, Yom Kippur, it's believed to be a day of forgiveness of sins and reconciliation unto God. This spiritualized servant interpretation, although unofficial, is the same thinking in the mind of Lucifer as presented in the Bible. See 2 Thessalonians 2. Spiritualism in the Final Atonement. 3 steps of UC, counterfeit of the sanctuary, Final Atonement. The 2 Thessalonians 2's man of sin enters the most holy place of the third temple, and this will take place at the end of the age. It is simply the echo of Isaiah 14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground that didst lay low the nations? Thou saidst in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit upon the congregation, the mount of the congregation, in the uttermost parts of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will make myself like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to Sheol, to the uttermost parts of the pit. They that see thee shall gaze at thee, they shall consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake nations, kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness, and overthrew the cities thereof, and let not loose his prisoners to their home? All the kingdoms of the nations, all of them sleep in glory, every one in his own house. But thou art cast forth away from thy sepulchre like an abominable branch, clothed with the slain, that are thrust through with the sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, as a dead body trodden under foot. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land. Thou hast slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall not be named forever. The next step from the lofty objectives of Isaiah 14 is the corporate issue. As Lucifer wanted to secure the allegiance of the corporate body of angels, as well as spreading his rebellion far and wide, until finally he was kicked out of the corporate heavens, and then secured corporate allegiance on planet Earth with the fall of Adam. Satan's theology of the sanctuary. In Satan's theology of the sanctuary, the corporate remains and is not in sin, since sin is an empirical concept just as good is, and both need to be blotted out in Lucifer's final atonement, which equals unity consciousness, the absorption into the divine and the blotting out of all empirical content. It accepts the fact that Satan enters the most holy place of the third temple by way of his emissary, the man of sin, who sits in the temple of God claiming to be God. It basically repeats Isaiah 14 when the Bible clearly states that Lucifer was cast out from heaven. In the final atonement of Satan, he secures the allegiance of the corporate world, planet, as well as the individuals, and produces a mark on the right hand and forehead. It is the mark of the false Shema of Deuteronomy 6:4 and 6:8. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. Here's the true seal and the false seal. The true mark is eternal oneness and duality, echad, one. Oneness and duality. The false mark is mark of singularity, yakid, and the law of one. In the demonic realm, Deuteronomy 6:4 is seen as the law of one, which is echoed by demons channeled in seances, as well as people who are contact with the so-called ascended masters or supposed alien brothers. This creates the concepts of the mark of the one God or the universe, and the individual as part of the one superconsciousness, which is quite purposeful at the time of the Third Temple, in eliminating the old religion, which worships Jesus Christ as an intermediator, whom the enemy presents as the angel or another emanation like Lucifer. Satan appeals to man by emphasizing man's inner godhood and his need to liberate himself from restrictive concepts that divide humanity. There are individual segments of that godhood that are entombed in the world of physical matter, which Satan, refers to as illusion or maya. The illusion of the universe, the mark of the one God, is that only by liberating one's self from the empirical content of the material universe can one be truly enlightened. When Satan appears on planet Earth, this is the language that he will use, and if he touches you, and without question, you will have a unity conscious experience. He has already had all his troops promoting similar ideas, especially in charismatic and Pentecostal circles where the preacher touches an individual and they either fall into a trance or go to sleep or experience ecstasy. Ezekiel 9, corporate ministration missing. Students of the sanctuary service recognize readily the corporate atonement is not seen in Ezekiel 9. The tabernacle of the congregation is missing, which reveals the presence of God moving from the most holy place to the altar in the court, Ezekiel 9:3. Azazel, the scapegoat, moves there as well for one specific purpose and will be seen by the corporate fallen world, the kairoi, probation of nations, as finished. The altar of incense is missing in Ezekiel 9, which if present would present Satan as Lucifer, bringing enlightenment to the world with regard to him being the father of the human race. 2 Corinthians 11:14-15. Since the forbidden fruit was for knowledge of a deeper type than most people can perceive. It's the knowledge of good and evil, and when higher consciousness is achieved, it becomes the deep teaching of Satan, where all knowledge and empirical content is erased. There is then the so-called bliss consciousness, which to all intents and purposes is the arrival at Pierre de Cardin's omega point, or as is more commonly known as the singularity or the one God, the source, or more familiar expression, cosmic consciousness. In other words, this higher consciousness, bliss consciousness, the omega point, cosmic consciousness with the universe, is Satan's final atonement, which is reaching singularity at the altar in the court, the law of one. Hence the importance, because John was commanded to not measure the court, Revelation 11:1-3, and here. See this link. Whereas in the true final atonement, it's the atonement of cleansing of the individual in the court, who, once atoned, cleansed and sealed. Ezekiel 9 is now allowed into the house of he who made. Satan's counterfeit entrance into the house is by way of UC and self-righteousness. In other words, UC is unto the man of sin's house. The third temple, the entire point of what Paul described in 2 Thessalonians 2. Satan Prometheus. Satan in the form of Azazel, the goat, which in the theological type personified a desert evil spirit, will be seen as the one who was banished from the heavens in order to pass the knowledge of enlightenment of UC to denizens of his fallen planet, a unity of cosmic consciousness, when the new initiates who enter into cosmic unity as the sons of God. Quite a counterfeit. During the millennium, Satan is relegated to Agartha of the pit, Isaiah 14:15, inner earth, Revelation 20:1-3, as does Job 1. Then Satan answered Yahweh and said, from going to and fro in the earth and from walking up and down in it. The dark cave of Mithra, where he claims to have had his birth, the Tauroctony, was etched in the caves where Mithra was worshipped by the Roman military, clearly illustrates this concept of inner earth in the form of the bottomless pit and said to be located in Antarctica. In the final atonement of Satan, Matthew 24:15, he will be seen as the one who sacrificed himself for his people in order to gain enlightenment for them. He was banished for your enlightenment. What a joke. Jesus explains this enlightenment problem in Matthew 24, the abomination of desolation, which carries the concept of Satan in the final atonement. Then if any man say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or Lo, here, believe it not. For there shall rise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you beforehand. If therefore they say unto you, Behold, he is in the wilderness, go not forth. Conclusion 1. This information on spiritualism exposed in the Final Atonement has been obtained by way of historic Gnostic beliefs, as well as the Mithraic mysteries, as well as the teachings of unity consciousness, as revealed in other historical sources. It is what the Bible refers to as knowledge falsely called, which, in a nutshell, equals blotting out of all empirical content in order to achieve what the occultists teach as being in unity with the universe or the so-called one. Conclusion 2. Does the saying, empty your mind, the practitioners teach, mean anything to you? But for those unsure, let's spell it out. The UC belief of blotting out one's empirical content, empty your mind of the empirical content, includes the Bible. Sins and guilt are emptied, and no requirement for repentance. And this is Lucifer's final atonement. The religion of the New Age, the religion of the law of one, cosmic consciousness. The many forms of neo-Gnosticism, neo-paganism, neo-Platonism, knowledge and bliss, so-called, is only achieved with the practitioner's instruction, emptying your mind, spiritual bypassing, then things like the knowledge of the divine will bring forth to the empty vault. See this link. The above article on spiritual bypassing has, in the paragraph, misconceptions about the topic of all topics. Clarifies that one entity is removed and tenfold others replace. This is to take place on he who made. This is to take on he who made and swept and garnished. Matthew 12:43-45, which says, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and findeth none. Then he saith, I will return into my house from whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then he goeth and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. He who made makes a big point, as Matthew 12:43-45 relates to the Day of Atonement, Leviticus 16, where the scapegoat is banished to the desert wilderness. Conclusion 3. Didn't Paul say something about the helmet of salvation? Spiritualism is rebellion and witchcraft. 1 Samuel 15:23. And spiritualism in the Final Atonement is much more significant than what many seem to see or even believe possible. The huge difficulty for Laodicea is this: they have the ministration of the Final Atonement in the most holy place when it's in the court. See the correction to see this link. Laodicea has an immense difficulty. They miss the importance of Ezekiel 9 and the seal of God. And even Ezekiel states, he who made moved to the altar in the court, and do not recognize they have no light in respect to the sanctuary doctrine. Laodicea was counseled to buy gold, that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear. And anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. Revelation 3:18. Conclusion 4. He who made described the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24:15 equals 1290 days, will be the real deal experience of spiritualism of Satan's final atonement with the 2nd Thessalonians guy. Something occurs prior to Matthew 24:15. And yes, you guessed it correctly. Lucifer impersonates Allos Parakletos prior to the second coming, to render Allos in Matthew 12:31 and John 16:8 totally irrelevant. That achievement blunts the first angel's message. The type is pictured in Ezekiel 8. The spiritualism of the final atonement is not future. It is occurring now.